find out with Dr. Kevin Lanza, who will discuss Houston's hot stops and the latest developments.
And I bring Billingsley Plus Tony-nominated actor Kevin Cahoon and Chief Development Officer at Covenant House, Texas, Felicia Broussard. Talk about Night of Broadway Stars tonight at the Wortham Theater Center.
And as Ernie, Frank, and I discuss the top headlines of the day, we want your thoughts, questions, and concerns. Give us a call at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth plans to reduce the number of senior officers at the Pentagon, saying in a video he wants, quote, less generals and more GIs. More on this from NPR's Tom Bowman.
Hegseth laid out his plan in a memo calling for a 20% cut in the number of four-star active duty generals and admirals and another 20% cut in National Guard generals. The secretary said he worked with the Joint Chiefs of Staff on the plan, and the goal was maximizing strategic readiness. There were some 800 generals and admirals in the military. Hegseth offered no detail how he would make the reductions. The top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Jack Reed, criticized the move, saying cutting experienced officers won't make the military more efficient. It could cripple it. Tom Bowman, NPR News.
President Trump's hosting Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who just arrived at the White House. Trump has said he was looking forward to the face-to-face meeting, but on Truth Social today, Trump also criticized current economic deals between the U.S. and Canada, saying that its northern neighbor is being heavily subsidized by the U.S. Canada's recent election that extended Carney's time in office was widely viewed as a referendum in that country against Trump's tariffs policies and threats to Canada's sovereignty. The administration is ratcheting up its pressure on Harvard University to comply with its demands or risk losing additional federal funding. From member station GBH in Boston, Kirk Carapezza reports.
In a letter to Harvard President Alan Garber, Education Secretary Linda McMahon accuses the university of a, quote, systemic pattern of violating federal law. She says Harvard has failed to address anti-Semitism and defied the Supreme Court's ban against its race-conscious admissions policy. Harvard is already suing the administration over its decision to freeze more than $2 billion in grants. A university spokesperson says the administration is illegally withholding research funding in retaliation for that lawsuit, calling it an overreach that will have a chilling effect on higher education. For NPR News, I'm Kirk Carapezza in Boston.
The Department of Homeland Security is offering a one-time stipend to people who, quote, self-deport. More from NPR's Jimena Bustillo.
DHS said it will give $1,000 to people who use the CBP Home app to return to their home countries. The money will allegedly be paid after they confirm their arrival through the app. They say this is a way to make it cheaper to remove people from the U.S. According to DHS, it costs $17,000 to arrest, detain, and remove one person. But questions remain on the effectiveness of the program. Immigrant rights advocates say there is an incentive for immigrants to trust the administration will follow through on payments or the promise that they can return.
That's NPR's Jimena Bustillo reporting. At last check on Wall Street, the Dow was down 200 points or roughly 0.5%. It's NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. It's expected to be a stormy day in the Houston area. Space City weather meteorologist Eric Berger says areas north of I-10, especially in Montgomery County, will see some activity this afternoon.
There's a tornado watch. The atmosphere is pretty favorable, lots of available energy to support tornadoes and straight-line winds and other damage. So we're looking at, heavy rainfall today and potential for severe weather such as tornadoes, particularly north of I-10.
Berger says the area south of I-10 will also get severe weather tonight and into tomorrow morning. It's Hurricane Preparedness Week, and News 88.7's Tom Perumian reports a new study rates how residents feel if they're prepared for when disaster strikes.
Daniel Potter, head of the Houston Population Research Center at Rice University, finds hurricanes in Houston represent equal opportunity destruction.
Houston's very interesting in that when you try to look at that association between socioeconomics and impact, it doesn't really exist here the way you might find it in other cities. What is different is the response and the recovery. And that is really something driven by a little bit of the preparation, but much more, it's about the resources to be able to get back, to become whole again.
Meanwhile, 50% of study participants found that they felt somewhat prepared to weather a disaster. 32% said they were not too prepared, 8% said they were very well prepared, and 11% felt they were not at all ready for a disaster. I'm Tom Perumian, News 88.7.
Harris County Public Health released its 2024 report measuring its efforts to keep Houstonians healthy. It distributed over 55,000 immunizations as well as more than 40,000 pet vaccines. As for mosquito control, it sprayed over 718,000 acres. Here's Leah Barton, the department's interim executive director.
We do that first by trapping and testing mosquitoes, and then wherever we see mosquito-borne disease, which here is principally West Nile virus, we'll go spray.
It's currently 78 degrees. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Hello. Good morning. Hello, Houston. You know what? Every day I always start off going through this whole list of things that you have to do. We need a link tree. So I can just give that and then people can go and get all of the different bits of information, but I'll do it again. Here you go. You can follow us on YouTube where we're coming to you live. It's at youtube.com. Look for the Houston Public Media channel, or you can just go to hellohouston.org and there you can find the orange bar. Click that. Remember, when you come and watch us on YouTube, like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Email, always open for you, talk@hellohouston.org. And then you can also join the conversation the traditional way by calling or texting 713-440-8870. Did I get it all in?
I love that texting is the traditional way.
It is
that is the way to go now.
But not Skyping. We'll talk about that a little later today.
A dial-up.
Skype's gone.
I know, Skype's gone.
Really?
And it became a verb for us.
Skype got skunked.
Skype got skunked. You know what is an active word for us today?
Yes,
the
tornado
weather.
watch.
Yes, Frank, tell me about it.
I know. Well, so far so good. There's been a lot of clouds, a bit of a threatening sky, but nothing really to talk about. There is, however, this very slow-moving system that's going to bring showers in the afternoon and probably this evening. And then tomorrow it'll start to edge out of here a little bit. But in the meantime, what does come in could be on the severe side and the heavy rain side. So flash flood watches, a tornado watch until 4. Just stay weather aware. But so far, we're in pretty good shape.
City proper and south of the city or just north?
You know, it looks like I-10 and north.
Okay.
So
and I know you never like that line.
I-10 separates everything in life, apparently, but especially weather. It is so often I-10 north or I-10 south. And this one looks, because the low associated with this is in the Panhandle, and it's going to be moving north across North Texas, that most of that will be to the north. But, that's when you could get an errant cell to produce a tornado. So that's what you have to watch out for.
The one more question I have on that, after the rain leaves us, is it bringing us humidity or cool?
It doesn't look like a big cool down, but it does look like sunshine for the weekend.
It was humid this morning.
Oh, I know.
It was so humid.
Yeah. I thought it'd be nice and comfortable. And I thought, wear the short sleeve. It's a little heavy, But no, I was
If
wrong.
you want to know what Frank is wearing, you can
go
just
to
go to our
YouTube.
YouTube and you can see what he's wearing. Talking about the weather, we're also going to be talking in the show today about Houston's hot stops. Those are how our bus container things that you sit in and wait for the bus to come and get you.
Bus container things?
What do you call them? Bus
it's
benches?
a bus stop. It's a bench.
But what do you call that enclosure.
Bus covering.
Bus
stop.
Yeah, bus stop.
Bus stop. I think of the bus stop as the sign.
Bus
Anyway, we're
stop.
going to be talking about Houston hot stops later on in the show. But as always, we begin with the topics of the day, and Celeste leads us off.
Yes. So the U.S. government plans to pay immigrants who are illegally in the country a stipend of $1,000 to, quote, self-deport. Speaking in the Oval Office, President Trump elaborated on the Department of Homeland Security's plan, and this is what he had to say.
What we thought we'd do is a self-deport, where we're going to pay each one a certain amount of money, and we're going to get them a beautiful flight back to where they came from, and they have a period of time. And if they make it, we're going to work with them so that maybe someday, with a little work, they can come back in if they're good people.
The Department of Homeland Security said in a news release that it would also pay for travel assistance for those who go through the proper channels, which would be the Customs and Border Protection app, and be deprioritized for arrest. President Trump also spoke about how the U.S. courts are making things difficult.
We're getting them out. It's a very difficult thing with the courts, because the courts have all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they said, maybe you have to have trials. We're going to have 5 million trials. Doesn't work. You wouldn't have a country left.
The move supports Trump's mass deportation agenda while cutting cost and easing pressure on immigration resources. How do you feel about the United States paying for undocumented people $1,000 to leave the country, as well as their travel expenses? Are you in favor of Trump's $1,000 offer? Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Let's start with, I think 5 million trials is a bit of a red herring. The reason 5 million trials don't work is because deporting 5 million people at once doesn't work.
And also, I think the president should be reminded of the term due process. And that you cannot just be, you're in this country, you are afforded due process.
Right.
It feels like, to me, this is now we're grasping at straws. What we're seeing is right now the lowest number of people coming into this country undocumented. We've seen the highest number of deportations already happening. And so it feels like a little bit like the president is like, okay, well, things are actually working. His plan has worked. And now he wants to kind of continue pushing this when it's like we're already seeing the effects happening.
Yeah. But I get it. I mean, if you can't give everyone due process to get them out at the same time, you're gonna back up the courts. It's just not going to work.
I know
so
that
what
Constitution gets in our way.
Well, you got to. So you say to people, look, you're not going to get due process. You're just going to leave, but we're going to give you $1,000 to leave.
Right. It's a way to step around the courts by saying they decided to leave. We just gave them some. And let me remind you, they're not just giving you flights. They're giving you beautiful flights.
Beautiful big
beautiful flight out of the country.
We all listen. My parents live in South Texas, right on the border, and a lot of the conversation from people that they know that come in and work down in South Texas and they go back to Mexico are saying it's not even worth it. We are not coming because it has become so strict and our regular. So to me, I think from a culture standpoint and from the messaging, the message is out. It's becoming. They don't want to be here.
Well, and not
on
only
their
that,
own terms is what I'm saying.
I agree with you completely. And did you see Macron's statement saying to research scientists, you want to come here and do your research, and you can't do your research because DEI is getting in your way and your funds are being taken because of your diversity? Come to France. We will be glad to have you.
But back to what you were talking about, Celeste, I think you're talking about two different issues. One is people coming in. The other is the people that are already here. And, making it more difficult if you're in this country will deter people from coming. And that stops some of that problem and concern.
Right. I mean, the
problem is, what do you do with them here? If you can't give them due process because it will overwhelm you, well, there's something at play here that is not right.
Right, and there's definitely a two-part, because that bite was also that other part about the due process. And in the state of Texas, Governor Abbott, in Mexico, has put billboards that says, we will come after you, we will deport you, we will fine you, do not come into this state.
I'm all for deterring coming in, unless, of course, when they're coming in because of the issues they're facing in their own countries and there's threat and all of that. And that's what our immigration statutes talk about, is that if you have to flee these kind of areas, and that's what we're supposed to be here for, to aid and protect. You don't like that? Change that bill and that wording.
There's
but people who follow our laws and come in here seeking asylum should be granted due process like we have for the history of this country.
The other
sorry, Frank, what were you going to say?
I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work.
Well,
$1,000 you would have
$1,000. Well, no, I mean, for people that are here that don't have much and they don't get paid minimum wage. They work very hard. $1,000 is like, well,
yeah, not bad.
I think it's an interesting solution because it removes a lot of the problems of it by saying they decided to go.
Well, when
it's a lot cheaper for us
self-deporting.
But wouldn't it make more sense to sort of leave the people that don't have a record, who are working hard, who came here to make a new life, let them have that opportunity, and the ones that are taking advantage of the system, in other words, committing crimes, those are the ones that seems like you could put in the system to give due process. And
right, but I don't understand this argument.
So few.
I know we've got to move on, but I
that's
don't.
Why you'd have time for them.
Right.
I don't understand the argument that for some reason criminals are not being treated like criminals. That for some reason illegal immigrants, undocumented people are not being held accountable to our laws as they are. Yes, you break the law, you broke the law. It doesn't matter who you are. So this idea that because they're here unofficially, that we're looking the other way, and that's why they need to be deported.
I agree with you.
Or that they're taking advantage of our healthcare systems, or that they're,
Yeah. Okay, we want to know what you think. 713-440-8870. A lot to unpack with that, but we're going to come a little closer to home. Lawmakers in the Texas House and Senate have agreed on a deal on how to lower Texas property taxes. A group of legislators has agreed to a tax cut package that would increase tax breaks for homeowners, provide bigger cuts for older and disabled Texans who own their own homes, and increase an inventory tax exemption for businesses. The deal still must be approved by both chambers. Still, the tentative agreement is a marked difference from the blow-up between the House and Senate lawmakers over tax cuts 2 years ago. On Monday, each chamber's chief tax cut spokesperson, that's State Senator Paul Bettencourt from the House of Republican, a Republican in the Senate, I'll get that's right, and State Representative Morgan Meyer, a University Park Republican, were praising each other's proposals and signaling their intent to pass them. In all, Texas lawmakers plan to spend $51 billion on cutting property taxes over the next 2 years. State budget watchers worry that Texas lawmakers committed to local tax cuts would not be affordable in the long term. So, what do you think about these tax cuts? Give us a call at 713-440-8870. I had a chance to speak briefly with Senator Bettencourt before session started this morning. Joining us now is Senator Paul Bettencourt. Senator, thank you for taking the time to talk with us a little bit. Help me understand how these tax cuts would work.
Well, this is great news for home and business taxpayers because we've got substantial exemptions coming their way. For all 5.7 million homeowners in the state, we're going to raise the ISD homestead exemption by 40%, up from 100,000 to 140,000. But wait, we're not done yet. We're going to add another component to over 65 and disabled exemptions, so they'll have an aggregate $200,000 exemption. And then the business owners, we're going to be dramatically increasing the business personal property tax. That's the tax that they pay on office furniture, fixtures, et cetera, exemption. We're going to move that up to $125,000. So these are the three great exemptions that will help really all home and business owners in the state of Texas.
Now, you've known me long enough to know my next question is going to be, how do we make up the shortfall of the money that we're saving our individuals?
Well, the good news is for the ISD taxes, the state will. So we're going to put in billions of dollars more into public education to pay for the homestead exemption increases so that the schools don't have to, and the taxpayers obviously get the benefit. So that's a serious win-win. And on the business tax, we're doing that for the school side, which is about half the bill. The other taxing jurisdictions do have to pick that cost up. It's relatively small from testimony. That's like less than 1% of their tax roll, and they'll be able to pay for it with new growth. But it's important that we keep our small businesses whole because they're really our job creation engine of the state, and that's what this is designed to do. It's a House priority bill.
You have Republicans from both yourself from the Senate and from the House. I'm curious, where do Democrats stand on this? Do you have any with you on this?
How about 100% of them in the Senate? Okay.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, the bill came out of my committee unanimously, the new House bill with the changes, and we'd already passed both homestead exemptions bills. Wait a minute. One bill did have one no vote by one Democrat out of Dallas, but since he's out of the listening area, we won't worry about it.
Okay. Let me ask you this. We're getting late in the session. I know this was something important to you to get this passed through. What else are you working on right now?
Well, I've got so much else coming down. I've got truancy bills, chronic absenteeism. One I think is going to be a blockbuster bill is special education. We're going to change what was the old school model to an intensity-based model. We're going to start with evaluations of kids and then put money to actually help the schools and the kids get early intervention. So I've got a ton more tax bills and voter integrity bills and the usual Paul Bettencourt stuff. About 80-90% of my stuff's already out of the Senate into the House.
Mm-hmm. Do you have time to get the rest of this done? And the follow-up to that question is, should your sessions be longer? Should you meet every year?
Well, I think that this year is an anomaly because the Senate went very hard early for 3 months where we passed and did a lot of this committee work. And the House was really waiting on their budget and the ESA bill to pass. And now they dropped the accelerator pedal, and they actually may be working on Mother's Day to catch up. So we'll see how that goes by the end of the session. We still have plenty of time to pass what I call are the important second-tier bills, and the tertiary third-tier bills too as well. We're actually passing House bills out of my committee already and off the Senate floor, and doing the same thing for Senate bills on the House side. So we'll see how it all stacks up at the end of the day. But definitely the trend is positive. And getting a deal on property taxes is, quite frankly, it's huge because the last time we had a argument about that, there was multiple special sessions. So that's not going to be a need for a special session this year.
Before I let you go, if you can just sum it up, how would we feel these in our pocketbook?
Well, you're going to feel them really directly once you approve them in November. And if we pass the budget plus these homestead exemption bills, the average home will get a $500 increase. But wait, we're not done yet. For the over 65 and disabled, that will be $950. And well over 50% of them will not pay a school tax after this. It's going to be really big because they're simply going to be out of ISD taxation. For the business owners, it's about $2,500, and the real savings is time because they don't have to do the rendition.
Senator Bettencourt, thank you very much for joining us and talking us through these proposals.
Anytime, Ernie.
Thank you.
Ernie spoke with Republican Senator Paul Bettencourt earlier before today's session about property tax cuts. Coming up on Hello Houston, an investigative piece on how Houston's bus stops get dangerously hot. Dr. Kevin Lanza of Houston's Hot Stops joins us, and we continue to take your calls on today's topics at 713-440-8870. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
As the trade war turns this economy upside down, older Americans are getting whiplash.
Who knows what's going to happen next? It's not like we're 30 and we can recoup. So it would impact the retirement.
I'm Kai Rizdal, the lived economy of those older Americans, next time on Marketplace.
You can listen to Marketplace. It's coming up tonight at 6:30.
This used to be a place called the Fertile Crescent. It was Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And it's part of what that whole area of Iraq was like until now.
I'm Sabrina Tavernisi. That's today on The Daily from The New York Times.
The Daily's on tonight at 7.
You know how important trusted news is for your ability to make informed decisions. That's why News 88.7 is your station.
At Houston Public Media, we give you the facts clearly and honestly so you can make decisions about your life.
Don't let anything stand in the way of your right to stay informed. Donate today to ensure that trusted news remains free and available for everyone in our community.
Give right now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support comes from the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, offering comprehensive cancer care that is compassionate, personalized, and driven by clinical research. More at stlukeshealth.org/cancer.
Support comes from Broadway Bank's commercial banking team. Since 1941, committed to helping businesses with their financial needs and growth. More information available at broadway.bank/commercial. Member FDIC.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Back in 2023, two former Houston public media reporters teamed up with Dr. Kevin Lanza, an assistant professor at UTHealth Houston School of Public Health, to produce the podcast Hot Spots, which looked into how Houston bus stops get dangerously hot during the summer months. In their investigation, they found that bus shelters inconsistently provided protection against the heat during some of the hottest months of the summer. The study conducted for Hot Stops was recently published in a peer-reviewed journal, Transportation Part D, Transport and Environment. To tell us more, we welcome Dr. Kevin Lanza, assistant professor in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences at UTHealth Houston School of Public Health. Dr. Lanza, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hey there. Thank you for having me, Celeste. It's good to see you, Ernie, Frank.
Thank you.
So why don't we start with, take us back really quickly. Why did y'all feel that there was a need to do a deep dive into Houston's bus stops?
Well, that's a great question. It's hot out there in Houston. Texas knows heat well, and it's expected to get hotter over time. And so we had done some studies in Austin, and they had shown that as temperatures increase, bus ridership decreases. And that's because we know that about 2/3 of folks who ride the bus in the US walk to get to and from the stop or station. And so that's when they're exposed to those high temperatures, and that could lead to people not wanting to take the bus. Yet we did find that trees had a protective effect where they mitigated the losses of ridership during extreme heat days. And so Sarah Ernst and Katie Watkins, two reporters at Houston Public Media, they had reached out to me about that study. And then during that conversation, we actually gamed out a new study, a science experiment, as they called it, where we measured heat stress, specifically wet bulb globe temperature, which is a heat stress metric that's advanced. It includes air temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, and radiation. So that really captures how it feels. And we measured that under bus stop shelters, as well as outside of those shelters, and then under trees at bus stops and outside of those trees to see if there are differences.
So in other cities, we're not the only ones that have great heat in our city, though we like to think we are the only ones. How have other cities handled this? Does it have to do with the enclosures we've built, or is this just something that they found? Because I can't imagine they're putting little air conditioners in all of these.
Gosh, yeah, if only, right?
Yeah.
So imagine the challenge that these transit authorities across the US and worldwide have with the elements, right? You're not only talking heat, you're talking about the rain, and you really have to think about your regional context, right? Some places like the Pacific Northwest, there may be a larger push to protect people from rain, while places like Texas, Houston, Austin, et cetera, that might be more heat is the main stressor in certain ways. So what we've seen are these shelters, these artificial shade structures, and there's many different designs. and they each affect those different components of wet bulb globe temperature, that air temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, radiation. So imagine having a walled shelter that's enclosed. That could actually, at times, possibly trap in that radiation from the sun and lead to those shelters acting like ovens in a way that are hotter than areas outside of those shelters.
Yeah, it would be a greenhouse effect is what you're saying, more or less.
Precisely.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. First of all, is the idea, and I'm all about trees, 15 degrees, even 20 degrees cooler in the shade of a tree, no question about that. And is a big lack of trees in Houston, especially in underserved communities where there are a lot of bus stops. So would the solution as far as trees be plant a tree or move the bus stop to where a tree is? Or a little of both?
Can I say and? Yeah, I think you have to be context specific. Great question there. And when we plant a tree, we don't plant a large 100-year-old oak, right?
Right. No, it's going to take time.
Pretty much you plant a stick in the ground. It's an investment. We should treat trees as infrastructure, right? That have multiple services, including cleaning our air and mitigating temperatures. And so as long as you have about 3 to 5 foot of space available to hold a street tree, and you have sign off on the different bureaucratic issues of where a tree can go, and then you have maintenance of that tree over time, then it could be a viable option. But I think what we can do is have this concert of strategies where you have the shelters themselves with the specific appropriate design for that region, but also for that site-specific context. And then maybe in parallel, you have those trees that are growing over time.
So what about moving a bus stop to where there is already a tree? And are you going to ask the homeowner who owns the tree if that's okay with them to now have a bus stop in front of their house?
I think permission rather than forgiveness would be a good way to go with this one. So I would ask the owner if that's possible. I think.
Do they have any recourse if they say, no, I don't want a bus stop in front of my house? I've seen this happen. I've actually seen this happen in Houston. And the homeowner was given absolutely no rights. It's like, sorry, this is easement. We're going to put a bus stop here, and your $800,000 home now has a bus stop in front of it.
I mean, you nailed it, Frank. Where these bus stops, they're not permanent, right? They're movable. They're movable places, and they have to really track with what the transit authority is trying to do. Which really, what they're trying to do is move people comfortably and safely and efficiently through a space. And so I think there has to be that conversation. I think that's where we need to have more of these partnerships between community members, practitioners, and researchers like myself.
Now, I want to go back to the study and the investigative piece that was originally done in 2023, and today it has now been peer-reviewed. Why don't you talk to us about why now it's been peer-reviewed and what was found during that piece?
Okay, love it. So, the Hot Stops media piece by Houston Public Media, that was a 4-part podcast series, expertly done, really a masterpiece with the team. And it ran through a couple of things. Each of the episodes had different components it covered. So the first was, what's the issue? Heat and transit systems. And this was told through the lens of people who take transit in Houston. Then they talked about the science experiment they actually conducted. Then third, they talked about the results and talking with folks at Metro, the transit authority locally, along with other folks in the community about the results. And then they had a bonus episode that talked about the reaction to the 3-part podcast series from residents and others. And so during those podcasts, especially towards the latter end, there was feedback provided by our local officials that the data that we provided to them, that science experiment we ran, where we measured these temperatures underneath shelters, outside of shelters, underneath trees, outside of trees, that those data weren't peer reviewed. Folks were saying that you can't really comment on these data unless it's been gone under expert scrutiny that can be provided through a scientific journal. And so that's exactly what we did. We put together a team, we took those data, and we provided a research article that got published a couple months ago in March, and is available for anyone to read.
We're speaking with Dr. Lanza of UTHealth. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870.
Okay, just as an idea here, I'm just throwing this out here, Kevin. So a couple of days, have you considered for these bus stops, which, by the way, sometimes aren't big enough if it's pouring rain, which is another issue, but to the heat issue, how about reflective roofs, some kind of reflection to help put the sun back out into the air, obviously. And what about, I know this is a really 2026 idea, what about solar-powered mini ACs in there or mini fans run by the sun itself?
Wow, we need to have you in these conversations. Thank you for these ideas. And I think folks are prototyping, across the world what works best. We do know, just to give another idea, water mist spraying systems.
Sure, Palm Springs.
Right. In Europe, in Asia, they have these in a systematic review. A research article showed that they cool temperatures about 14 degrees Fahrenheit on average. You turn a 100-degree day to 86.
Sure.
However, again, that's all context specific. Think about places that have water scarcity. Are we really willing to spray potable water onto individuals? There's chances for Legionnaire's disease, waterborne illness. So you really have to play where you're at. In terms of reflective materials, that would very much provide a protective effect in terms of radiative heat gain. So the radiation or the heat wouldn't be felt by the material as much and then emitted near its surface. I think the main thing is shade is king. We want to provide shade to cover and protect from the sun's energy directly hitting individuals, and we want to provide wind flow. We need the breeze to not be mitigated by having some types of enclosed shelter structure. I think that's really the 1-2 punch here.
You know, Frank is the problem solver and I'm the blame layer. So I want to go back and find out. So who decided these were the enclosures for us? I would think you would know in a region that gets as hot as we get and with the sun penetration we have, you would think about what you're buying for your city. Where did this fall apart, or am I just looking at it wrong?
You're looking at it, and I'll say that it's really the transit authorities have that opportunity to find a vendor and to go with the design that best matches what they're looking for. There's also different districts that have different ways of purchasing and putting out different types of bus stop shelter designs. Believe it or not, there are 22, I believe, based on me talking with Metro, 22 different shelter designs across the greater Houston area.
Are some better than others?
Yes. So what our study found that was published a couple months ago was that we only looked at 4 shelter designs, right? We were limited by resources, our person power going out there measuring the temperatures. But what we saw were 2 classic designs that is most likely the one you see when you're walking around Houston. It's got these 3 acrylic plastic panels, and it's got the kind of roofing over it. And then you have these 2 other designs we looked at that were open air designs. They had these kind of glass roofing structures, and they weren't beholden to these side panels or walls that could be obstructing the wind flow. And what we found is that on average, these shelters did cool. So let's make sure that's heard out there. These shelters were cooling on average compared to unshaded areas outside shelters. Yet there were differences in cooling based on the shelter design. Those that were enclosed, the classic shelters, those were not as cooling. Yet the ones that were open air were more cooling. Trees were about 2 times as cooling as all shelter designs.
And that's what I was just going to ask you. You mentioned trees is obviously an obvious solution to this. When it comes to planting those trees, not necessarily moving bus stops, but just already existing bus stops, planting trees, would that fall under Metro? Would that fall under the city? And where are we at now to activating solutions based on this research?
Right. We're not doing this research just to raise up issues for the sake of raising up issues, right? We're trying to be solutions oriented with what we're doing here, and we're trying to do so in partnership with other folks. There's no necessary bad guy in this case, right? We're all working through the challenges and restrictions we have available at our different spaces. So what we're seeing is who needs sign off. The Houston Public Media already kind of went through the list in lots of ways. Houston Parks and Rec has approved. They're supporters of us planting trees and them providing those permits to plant said trees and to lead those planting initiatives with potential community partners and volunteers at bus stops, along with routes to and from bus stops, which is also just as important in lots of ways. Not only the stop, the intermediate destination, but how are you getting to and from those spaces? Because we know about 80% of Houstonians are walking to get to and from the bus stop. And so Houston Parks and Rec Department is able to provide the support and the permits. Metro needs to provide the sign-off that they'd like to have them at their stops themselves. And folks at nonprofits, including Trees for Houston, they've already put themselves behind the idea of, hey, we'll provide some trees. You know, the trees are there, we'll provide them, and then we need to figure out a maintenance plan. So it really is, and then as Frank brought up earlier, you got to think about those community folks, right? And the residents, and where are those bus stops? And are they excited and interested in having those types of infrastructure right in front of their houses?
Until we get to where we need to be, Kevin, I would suggest telling everybody at a bus stop to bring an umbrella, not only for the rain, but also to keep the sun off of them. I mean, that really is about all you can do until your solutions come to fruition.
You know, that's a good point, is that you have these environmental interventions, right, where the community, the city or the municipality at large creates some type of intervention, the shade structures, the trees. You also have individual level behaviors, right? So carrying that umbrella, wearing light, loose-fitting clothing, wearing that hat, bringing water with you, maybe even a mister if that makes sense. So it's kind of this suite of strategies that are available. What I will say is, at the end of the day, this study seems like a no-brainer, right? It's like, why do we need a study to show trees cool and shelters cool?
True.
True. I think the main takeaway, if folks who are listening, would be what this study was different than other studies was that it showed that trees were better at cooling than shelters on average. Shelters were cooling on average, yet there are differences based on shelter design. And if it's unshaded under a shelter, it could be hotter than outside of a shelter based on its design.
Did you do any studies on how long a person is under a bus stop until a bus comes? I mean, is it 10 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? Do people wait 30 minutes?
So we did a study in Austin, Texas, because I mentioned earlier how we saw that high temperatures led to lower ridership in Austin. So we did a follow-up, a qualitative study to get that thick, rich, deep description from community members who use the bus about heat and transit use. And what they told us was kind of what you're getting at, is heat exposure was real and a challenge to them and their children, because they often went with their children to the bus. The stops are far away. So that's a long heat exposure getting to and from the stop. Then when you get there, the bus could be delayed. So that's continued exposure to heat. Yep. When there also may not be shelter or shade when you get to that space. And then if they're late, or the headway, as is the frequency of how often the bus is coming to that stop, if it's a pretty long headway, then that's just continued exposure. Yep. So we have to find ways, not only environmentally, to support folks by having those trees at bus stops, but also programmatically. How can our transit authority work with the heat and the individuals using their transit to make sense and be most efficient with reducing heat stress to their riders?
And we did receive a comment from Alex on our YouTube. She says, as a regular Metro rider, I'm disappointed by the inconsistent bus stops. Some have shelters, but others leave us exposed to rain. Many are on muddy ground instead of proper sidewalks. And even covered stops can't fit everyone during heavy showers. This affects our comfort, safety, and accessibility. Metro, let's work together to standardize shelters, pave stops, and create a better experience for all riders.
She's in your court.
So what's the plan moving forward?
Yep.
Holly. Well, thanks for that comment, Alex, and for relaying it. I'm all on board with what you're saying, and I hear those words, work together. And I think I'd be remiss to say that Metro has not been working together with folks. I know they have a strong communications and engagement arm. And the plan moving forward is, I already know Metro is working through prototypes of new bus stop shelter designs that are truly directly focused on mitigating heat stress of its riders. They also have this a real mission of putting shelters at every bus stop where feasible. Where feasible, there's an asterisk, right? Because sometimes you have ditches and you don't have the space to actually, at that site, put a bus stop shelter, right? Mm-hmm. And so one idea moving forward that I'm working on with kind of local organizations is, why not turn this into a youth environmental education opportunity? So we're thinking intergenerational, right? Who is our future? It's our youth. And learning about not only how heat impacts health and bus ridership, but also becoming literate on using bus transit. Because we know using the bus is better for the environment than using a car. And we can think through, why not have a youth-led initiative to measure these temperatures at the bus stops, under shelters and under tree shade, and then communicate and discuss with community members in the site of focus to understand what are their thoughts on the heat, where would they like to see the trees. And then by doing that co-design where you're actually asking community members where they want the trees and where they would be most helpful, then we can finish the system where we then start planting trees because we have sign off from Houston Parks and Rec Department and Metro. Yeah. So it really is a full multi-sectoral affair, but I think there's an opportunity to incorporate environmental education of our youth in doing this resilience of our transit systems.
Dr. Kevin Lanza is the assistant professor in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences at UTHealth Houston School of Public Health. Dr. Lanza, thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Stay cool out there.
Coming up, we'll talk to Broadway great Kevin Cahoon as Hello Houston continues. Stay with us.
Support comes from Signify Business Cash by Wells Fargo. With this business credit card, cardholders can earn rewards on business purchases with no caps or categories to track. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/signify. Terms apply. Support for Houston Public Media comes from Central Market, offering ways to celebrate moms, including flower arrangements, brunch ingredients, pastries, wines, and more. Ideas at centralmarket.com. Support comes from HealthLink Advisors, helping hospitals safeguard patient care and operations against cyber attacks with documented continuity solutions. Details at healthlinkadvisors.com. Join us for Hello Houston, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., taking a deep dive into the stories that matter to Houstonians, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained, with the generous support from our founding sponsor, Kathy Sanders.
And now back to Hello Houston. To share your thoughts on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Tonight, some of Broadway's biggest and best vocalists will be coming to Houston Wortham Theater Center in support of area youth overcoming homelessness for an event called Night of Broadway Stars. The event will feature performances from the stars of some of Broadway's most popular musicals, as well as a performance by the youth of Covenant House, Texas, a faith-based organization committed to providing shelter for homeless youth. They'll be sharing personal stories on how they found their way to Covenant House and the experiences they've had because of it. But to join us and tell us more about it is Tony-nominated actor Kevin Cahoon and Felicia Broussard, Chief Development Officer at Covenant House, Texas. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Before we get into everything I want to talk to you, Kevin, about, I want to start with a little bit about Covenant House and explain to folks who you are, what you do, and why it's so important.
Well, thank you so much first for having us here. Covenant House, Texas has been the exclusive provider of comprehensive services for 18 to 24-year-olds in Houston, Texas. And so every day and every night we serve young people who have been kicked out, abandoned, have been trafficked, those who have aged out of foster care, and anyone who's at risk of living on the street. And so the alternative to that is a place where you can come and have sanctuary and peace, but also a path to never encounter homelessness again. And so while they're with us, we are giving them more than just the basic needs, which is all a part of what they get. But while they're there, we're really helping 18 to 24-year-olds move to a place of economic stability through education and workforce development opportunities. We're faith-based, so there is the opportunity to grow spiritually as well. And then, of course, they are exposed to all sorts of different life skills classes, from budgeting to healthy living, nutrition, and most importantly, we have a medical clinic on our campus. And so that addresses their mental health needs. We have psychiatrists and psychologists on our campus as a partnership with Baylor College of Medicine, and also their physical care as well.
Covenant House has been around a while, it seems like.
Yes,
I've been to a lot of
years.
galas for Covenant House.
Yes, thank you. Good to see you again. Yes, this is our gala, and we've just changed it a bit. It's no longer just a gala. It is a gala plus performances. And so we're excited to be at the Wortham tonight and really doing what Houston does best, and that is entertain and celebrate, but for a cause.
Right, you all do great work.
And not only did you pluck a Broadway star to come, you brought home a Houston native.
That's right.
Who I would have to say is probably my favorite overachiever of anyone I know.
Oh my God.
When you read through his bio, you're like,
Unbelievable.
what? He was the world's youngest rodeo clown?
That's true.
Oh, wow.
Is
Is that true,
Houston
Kevin?
Livestock Show and Rodeo at the Astrodome for 10 years.
You started at 6?
I did.
Oh,
That's what I wanted to do. I saw the clowns and I said, Dad, that's what my dad grew up calf roping, and my aunt was a barrel racer, and my parents met at the rodeo club, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be a clown. So lo and behold, I was at the Astrodome doing that.
With that history, were your parents more excited you wanted to be a rodeo clown or a Broadway star?
They might have been relieved that I said I want to be an actor because, you know, although it's a challenging life, you're not being chased by bulls. But, you know, Houston was the foundation for my performing career. I started at Theater Under the Stars, Humphrey School of Musical Theater, went to HSPVA. I sang at the opening of the Wortham Center in 1987.
Don't do the math.
Don't do the math. But, you know, it just gave me the foundation. Houston is such a great cultural city. And I had every opportunity I could ever imagine. You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
True or false?
Tell me.
You won the Star Search?
I did. Wow. Sherry Young was an agent in Houston that I did local commercials with. Star Search came through town. I auditioned. I got it. The next thing I know, we're in LA, and I won 1985 Teen Male Vocalist, singing show tunes. Everyone thought I was going to lose because everyone else was singing like Van Halen and Michael Jackson and the hits of the day, and I'm singing Some People from Gypsy and Rum Tum Tugger from Cats. I mean, the writing was on the wall.
Unlike those other vocalists, you made a career of it. It was a wise move for you.
Well, thank you. I
Because-
just did what I wanted to do and what I loved, which was songs from musicals.
We were just talking the other day. The Tony nominations just came out.
Yes.
What was it like when you got your Tony nomination?
I mean, it was a dream come true. It was a dream come true, and it was a show called Shucked, which was written by Brandy Clark and Shane McAnally and Robert Horn, and it was all about people in the country and family. And I knew I couldn't get an audition for Shucked originally. My agents were like, they don't want to see you. They haven't done it. I ran into a friend, and he was like, I'll get you in. He was a musical director. Got me in, and, you know, it took 10 years to get Shucked. Started at the Dallas Theater Center to get it to Broadway. Wow. And somehow they let me stay on the whole 10 years. And it was a dream come true.
Yeah.
You know, it was a career marker of what you dream can happen. It may take a long time. Hang on to the back of the pickup truck, but it'll happen.
You really have to see that show twice.
You really
to get
do.
all the puns.
jokes. Yeah.
It is so quick and so funny.
It
I
is.
saw it on Broadway.
Oh, you did?
Yes. Were you in the whole run?
Yeah, the whole run.
Then I saw you.
Yeah, Peanut, the brother.
Yep.
You know,
Before I leave, I'm just
Tell
curious
me.
because we heard all the stories of people finding out that they got nominated.
Yeah.
How did you find out when you got nominated? Were you watching it, or did someone call you? Or
No, I was watching, and I had my mom on FaceTime because I wanted us to sort of share the experience together. And, You know, I had debated, should I watch, should I not? But then I thought, you know what? It may never happen again.
Yeah.
And if it happens,
never know.
Experience it. So I watched, and it was thrilling. And everyone I know contacted. People I went to elementary school with, people I went to, you know.
Sorry.
I was going to say, so what does it mean to be now back in Houston and performing tonight?
What's a bigger thrill, the Tony nomination or coming back to Houston?
Listen, come on. They are both equal, I have to say. You know, the Covenant House does such incredible, incredible work. The people that are affected by being unhoused, the age range is 18 to 24.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people have nowhere to go. They have no one to turn to. No matter your gender expression, your gender identity, your sexual orientation, your religion, your race, Covenant House is a home for you. This is a place that you can go to and you will find help. And so to marry that with Houston and Broadway and the Covenant House, I mean, listen, I couldn't say no. I immediately was like, absolutely. Tell me where to be and what time to be there.
Tell me what we're going to see if we go tonight.
You are going to see the most incredible vocalist that I am in awe of. Josh Young, who was in the Broadway revival of Jesus Christ Superstar. You have Brooke Wood and Rayshawn Lamar from The Voice, who are incredible vocalists. Rita Harvey, who is Christine in Phantom of the Opera on Broadway.
Wow.
And Neil Berg, who put it all together, is a great composer of Broadway musicals. My Cousin Vinny, which is going to Broadway. Grumpy Old Men, which is touring the country. Like, I can't wait to hear everyone sing tonight. Like,
what are you going to sing?
I might be doing a tune from Shucked.
Maybe
Love.
Why
And then
not?
I just did a really cool production of La Cage aux Folles in L.A. in the fall that Sam Pinkleton, who directed Oh Mary, which is the toast of Broadway, directed this new production of La Cage aux Folles that I was in with Cheyenne Jackson. So I'm going to do I Am What I Am, the version that we did, which is a great Jerry Herman show tune. And then maybe a little Suddenly Seymour, which I performed my senior year at HSPVA. I got to be Seymour. So it all comes back full circle.
Yeah. So how many folks in the audience do you know tonight?
That's going to be really fun. They're going to say, I went to elementary with you. I went to junior high with you.
Be careful, your past is going to be out there.
That's right. I got I'm okay with that. I got a pretty clean track record. So, but I'm thrilled. I'm really honored and thrilled to be here tonight. So, and there are tickets that are still available. So go to Covenant House TX. Don't spell out Texas. It's tx.org. Get your tickets. There's a silent auction. It's going to be a great, and the youth of the Covenant House are performing tonight, which is going to be, I dare there to be a dry eye in the house.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, Felicia, I assume everyone can find out more about the work you folks do as well as about the concert tonight by going to your website. I'll let you say it again.
Yes, that's CovenantHouseTX.org. CovenantHouseTX.org.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled with the work you folks are doing. Thrilled that you get to come back to town and share your talents with all of us. And homecoming is really kind of fun. In a lot of ways, people will often say you never appreciate it in your own hometown until you go out and do something else, and then you come back.
That's right.
Boy, you're coming back in triumph.
That's right. Well, that's very kind. Thank you.
Now, does Star Search ever have reunions? Do you guys even keep up with each other?
No, but we should.
You should, because that was such a huge. Sam Harris was big back in the day.
My year was
Ellen DeGeneres.
Rosie O'Donnell was the year that I was on. Sinbad was my year.
Big names came out of Star Search. It wasn't just a talent show on TV.
Britney Spears.
It was Britney Spears. That's right. That was the next. She's a little younger than me. But that was.
Let's do it.
I still pinch myself.
Let's
Can't
get
believe
that
it
reunion
happened.
going.
Kevin Cahoon is a Tony-nominated actor, and Felicia Broussard is the Chief Development Officer at Covenant House, Texas. Thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thanks for having us.
Night of Broadway Stars is tonight, May 6th, at the Wortham Theater Center. Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll talk with hurricane forecaster Phil Klotzbach about this year's upcoming hurricane season, and the Texas Tribune's Berenice Garcia explains how the city officially becomes a city in Texas. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Donations come in many forms: a monthly membership, a one-time gift, and that extra vehicle you no longer need. We take any kind of vehicle in any condition. Learn more at houstonpublicmedia.org/cars. And thank you.
We have a tornado watch in effect until 4 o'clock this afternoon. Currently overcast, breezy, and 80. This is your NPR station, KUHF, Houston. News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, we continue diving into the top stories of the day, such as lawmakers in the Texas House and Senate agreeing on a deal to lower Texans' property taxes. I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. Then we'll speak with Dr. Phil Klotzbach, research scientist in the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State University, who talks about this year's hurricane forecast.
And I'm Ernie Manous. Plus, the Texas Tribune explains how Starbase, Texas officially became a city in Texas.
And we want to hear from you, so give us a call at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Just go to houstonpublicmedia.org and click the big orange banner.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump's showering praise on his latest guest at the White House. He says Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is a very good person and predicts the U.S. and Canada will stay friends, quote, regardless of anything. Trump possibly alluding to their dispute over tariffs and his persistent notion that Canadians would be better off as Americans.
There are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem.
Trump says it would be a good marriage between friends. On behalf of Canada's electorate, Carney declined.
Having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale.
Carney's election was widely seen in Canada as a referendum on Trump. After 2 rounds of voting, Germany's parliament elected conservative politician Friedrich Merz as the country's newest chancellor. Here's NPR's Rob Schmitz.
It was the first time in Germany's history that a candidate for chancellor failed to win on the first ballot. But after 2 rounds of voting, Merz was confirmed as Germany's 10th chancellor, winning 325 out of 630 votes in parliament. Because the votes were secret ballots, it was not immediately clear, and might never be known, who had defected from Merz's camp to vote against him. His coalition is led by his center-right Christian Democratic Union and its Bavarian sister party, the CSU. They're joined by the center-left Social Democrats, led by outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who lost the national election in February. Rob Schmitz, NPR News, Berlin.
The U.S. intelligence community says it does not believe Venezuela's president controls a criminal gang that operates in the United States. This directly contradicts claims by President Trump about the gang. More from NPR's Greg Myrie.
President Trump says Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, controls the gang, Tren de Aragua, or TDA, which is active in the U.S. Trump cites this as his administration deports alleged gang members to a prison in El Salvador under an 18th century law, the Alien Enemies Act. But a declassified memo from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence reached the opposite conclusion. It says, quote, the Maduro regime probably does not have a policy of cooperating with TDA and is not directing TDA movement to and operations in the United States. The memo was obtained by the Freedom of the Press Foundation and shared with NPR. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
U.S. stocks are trading lower this hour, with the Dow down 285 points, or roughly 0.5% at 40,932. The S&P is down 0.5% as well, and the Nasdaq has fallen more than 0.5%. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Live for News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. A tornado watch is in full effect until 4 p.m. today. There's a potential for scattered hail and wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour, so stay safe. Acadian Area Mud is investigating $8.2 million in fraudulent transfers from its investment account. From the Fort Bend County Bureau, News 88.7's Natalie Weber reports.
Fort Bend County Mud number 35 says millions of dollars from its investment account were fraudulently transferred to, quote, outside financial institutions. The unauthorized transfers happened in early April, according to a news release from the Mud. The district has recovered $3.4 million of the fraudulently transferred funds. It's still in the process of recovering the rest of the money. The Mud's traditional bank account, which is used for daily operating expenses, was not compromised. In a statement, a spokesperson for the Mud said it is, quote, solvent and fully capable of meeting its current debt obligations and operating expenses. From the Fort Bend County Bureau, I'm Natalie Weber, News 88.7.
The lead Senate bill aimed at reducing property taxes received its hearing in the House Ways and Means Committee. Senate Bill 4 would raise the homestead exemption to $140,000, up from $100,000 now. James Quintero of the Conservative Texas Public Policy Foundation spoke in favor of the bill.
If I have one plea to the body today, though, it is this: do more, both because it's needed and it's possible.
Additional property tax relief is one of Governor Greg Abbott's 7 emergency items for the 89th legislature. He named it alongside school vouchers as an item he says must pass this session, suggesting that the failure to pass it could lead him to call a special session. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
What are you laughing about?
You just said, can I say something? And I said to Celeste, no, he must sit there silently.
Well, no, it's a really interesting YouTube comment, because we were talking about the bus stops being so hot.
Yes.
And they said misters, and Ted Spradley says, misting coolers in Houston. No. Misting coolers work by evaporative cooling when the relative humidity is below something like 70%, which is almost never in Houston. So that is a point. That's why you don't have the misters at restaurants here like you do in Palm Springs and in Phoenix, because in Phoenix and Palm Springs the air is so dry, 10, 11% humidity. Here it's always at least 30, 40%, if not 60, 70%. So Ted has a point. Anyway, you can go to YouTube and comment on anything you want.
Like we always say, we have the best listeners and viewers that follow us. Yes, over on YouTube, you can find us. We stream live over there also. And as we often say, there's a chat that goes on there that's a companion to the show. You're enjoying, I hope, enjoying. And so go on over there. You can find us on the Houston Public Media channel, or just go to our website, hellohouston.org, and click that bar. Remember, emailing us. We take them on all the topics we're sharing with you today and the stories we're covering. Talk@hellohouston.org, or texting and calling the old-fashioned way, 713-440-8870.
Weather's still fairly quiet for us.
There's still weather out there?
Yeah, there's still tornado watch, and there's a flash flood watch, but nothing much going on here. It's all way to the northwest of us, but the tail of all of this is going to swing through later today and this evening, so don't put your guard down.
And we're going to talk more about hurricanes and weather coming up
this hour.
I love
it. You'll love Phil. He's amazing.
Yeah,
right.
But as always, Celeste, start us off with some new, fresh topics.
President Trump says he is ordering federal agencies to rebuild and reopen Alcatraz, the notorious maximum security prison that closed more than 60 years ago. Quote, he said, "I am directing the Bureau of Prisons together with the Department of Justice, FBI, and Homeland Security to reopen a substantially enlarged and rebuild Alcatraz to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders." Trump said this again in a post on Truth Social. Alcatraz once housed dangerous criminals such as the infamous mobster Al Capone under an incarceration strategy that sought to concentrate difficult prisoners in one facility, segregating them from less dangerous inmates in the prison system. Is reopening Alcatraz a good idea? Give us a call or shoot us a text at 713-440-8870.
Because the one thing we've got a shortage of is prisons. I'm kind of fascinated by this. I think, once again, it's you enjoyed that one? I did. Like that? It's the concept of a title of a pop culture reference that our president loves so much. So because Alcatraz lives in the collective imagination as this horrible, fierce prison we should reopen. Build a new prison if you want. Build it as technically advanced as you want. What's sitting on the rock right now is a museum. It is not in any way ready to be a prison again. The amount it would cost to retrofit it to be current with everything we need seems more of like so you can hang the name on it than it is to actually build.
Has beautiful views of San Francisco.
Yeah,
and the Golden Gate Bridge. That's it. Have you been there?
No, I have.
I've
seen it from the coast.
Well, I've been there twice, and it is for 60 years old. It will have to be completely redone. Right. You're going to have to figure out how to get all the metal out of there and the cement. I mean, it's a ridiculous idea, and it's not enough island to make it larger. You can go you can go up, but you can't go out. It's already.
Do you
covering
remember when they wanted to make it a hotel? Do you remember when that was a proposal?
Was that a proposal?
I would have stayed there then. I don't want to stay there as a prison.
You know, I think what people would say is that is it actually more fiscally responsible to maintain something or work on something that's already built than going out and rebuilding something from scratch?
I just think he has it in for California. I just don't think he likes California. I mean, we're going to tariff the Hollywood movies. Now we're going to reopen Alcatraz as the most fearsome.
But the tariffing the Hollywood movies is you're tariffing outside movies coming in to boost up the American film industry.
Let's hope that works
That's
that way.
What the plan was behind.
Yeah.
I just think he loves the name. We all think Alcatraz, it's got that whole romantic notion to it as the worst and the hardest. No one can escape
Right.
it.
You can't swim across those waters. You'll die.
He talked about that the only man who ever escaped, they found his clothes with shark bites in it. I do believe he said that was the worst Trump imitation ever done.
That was a bad Trump, but I will say it does feel a little SNL-y.
Yeah.
It has a little.
Yeah, they'll probably have a time with it. I think he's just trying to spin it so that we don't talk about the economy.
He's always finding something new. I often said to my mom, I still say it to my mom, there's a difference between the things you say and the thoughts you have, and you can keep the thoughts to yourself. I feel our president likes to say out loud every thought that enters his mind, and then we as the news media cover every single one of them.
And we take the bait.
And it
we
drives
bite
us
the bait.
crazy.
We're talking about it.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, let us know. What do you think? Alcatraz, good idea. 713-440-8870. Have you visited it? Have you gone to the museum that's there? Also, I'm going to throw in my idea. If they turned it into a hotel, would you stay there? I'd be curious to know if people like
the
that.
rooms would be very
somebody would stay there.
Very small.
I think the rooms are very small. You'd have to combine.
The rooms
and if you
are
like
very small.
community bathrooms,
you're kind of going to the bathroom in your own cell. So
Gross.
you got to know your bunkmate really well.
You can also make your wine right there. Okay, moving on. Here's a story I have been holding on to for a while. I'm finally going to get to it. We've been talking about it for a week. I hope it's still news. Okay. Carnival Cruise Line has banned 24 passengers from sailing after a fight broke out at the Galveston, Texas cruise terminal. In a video shared on social media back on April 26th, a group of passengers are seen shoving each other inside the cruise terminal. The footage also shows signs and barriers are knocked down with at least one person pushed to the ground. The travelers appeared to begin punching and kicking the one person on the ground, and security officers hurried to intervene. The brawl continued even after security guards arrived, and surrounding passengers can be seen reacting to the fight. The incident happened as the passengers were debarking the Carnival Jubilee. Carnival had just wrapped up a 7-day itinerary that went into the Western Caribbean. I don't know what that has to do with the story, but it's there to share with you. So, should these passengers not only have been banned, but banned for life? Or should they get a second chance? Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Well, I could understand if they were at the sushi bar and they were down to 3 sushis. That would warrant a fight.
3 sushis?
They were disembarking. This was totally, I don't know what happened. I don't know if
we don't know what
I don't know if
caused it.
something happened in a 7 days out there on the waters where you think you're all alone and nobody's going to know what you're doing. And somebody got, I don't know, I'm making it up. Maybe somebody got angry at somebody else because of what happened on the cruise. And then they started the fight figuring, okay, we're off the cruise. Now I'm going to kick your butt.
These people got into a fight, and the question is, should passengers be banned for life or get a second chance? Absolutely banned for life. You are adults. You acted like children. You will be treated like children.
Well, they were young. They were young adults, from what I could see.
Young adults.
Did you watch the video?
Adult. No, I didn't.
They looked like they were pretty much under the age of 30.
I saw parts of the video, and I try to censor what goes into my mind.
I am in your camp on this. I think we have a lack of civility in our culture everywhere now, and if you're going to behave like that, I'm sorry. I don't care what the reason is. It isn't a disagreement. It isn't one person pushed another person and they're done with it. It was, it just blew up into something. Stop it. Yep. Behave. And it's not like we're saying you can't go to a grocery store, you can't get gas for your car. It's going on a Carnival cruise.
Well, the other part of it is there are children around, and then also maybe this will
the fun cruise.
Other people will see. Listen, we don't play around with this. That is bad behavior. You are banned for life. You will not go on a fun cruise.
Same thing happens on an airplane. I mean, if you misbehave on a plane, you're on a no-fly list forever.
Yep.
So,
and that can have much more far-reaching complications. A cruise is kind of usually a fun event. There are other cruise lines if you decide not to go on Carnival.
I don't know that the no sail. I mean, Carnival is owned by Royal Caribbean.
So you probably bought. Well, I do
you're
know.
You're probably.
I knew one person who was banned from life from a Carnival cruise.
Oh wow!
Do tell.
Let's have that person on.
No, and I do believe it was just for the Carnival fleet of ships. They were banned from life for. I just don't know. I've seen people in paperwork and trying to organize things. I find it very hard that there's a sophisticated system who knows this person is on that banned for life list. I'm sure they could get back on one. But yeah, no, they do ban people for life. This was for behavior that happened on the ship that was seen as unsavory, and therefore they were actually taken from their room and held on the ship for the last day of the.
Well, the video I saw, they were in the area where you collect your luggage.
Right, they had already disembarked.
Yes,
they had already disembarked. Still, again, sorry,
how
zero tolerance.
How did they find out who they were?
Act like little children. You'll be treated like little children. Banned for life. Now we are getting comments on our YouTube about the prior topic that we were just talking about, Alcatraz, and the president potentially saying that he would like to reopen and reinvigorate Alcatraz. From Fritz, what a potential waste of money. The cost to operate it would be way beyond any Supermax at no increased value. It's just PR, as you guys said. We also did receive a text that says Alcatraz, while reducing government spending, let's spend gazillions, again, gazillions on this. Trump, stop already. We already have McNeil Island Federal Prison in the Pacific Northwest building it there. From Tom.
Yep, I think we're in agreement on that one, I think.
So what's your final take on this Carnival altercation?
Ban for life. Good
Ban
thing.
for life.
I think if you misbehave, people have to be civil in this society. That's how we build. Celeste is arm gesturing.
I'm doing
it's
fuera.
Done. They're
Fuera.
done. Throw them out.
No rehab
Fuera.
for you.
No,
we're not going to get a therapist to figure out the problem.
No.
Yeah.
24 is a lot of people. They thought
that is very large.
It's a group thing. I think they thought, we can all.
Well,
just do this.
those things just start and people get going.
And there are families and children around. I mean, no, absolutely
all right,
not.
Frank.
Terrible.
I was remiss in following this last night.
Did you see the Met Gala at all?
No, I saw little bits of it, and I really feel bad because I love to go in and talk about what everyone was wearing. But
it was beautiful. It's known as fashion's greatest night. Brings out celebrities and creative ensembles. Supposedly $75,000 a ticket.
Wow.
And you have to be invited. Not just anyone can get a ticket.
You got to be invited. The event's purpose is to raise money for the New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art, especially the costume part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Last night's attendees were expected to follow the dress code tailored for you. Once up the blue floral stairs and inside the museum, they visited the Superfine Tailoring Black Style exhibition, which highlights how clothing and style are connected to Black identities. From Diana Ross, who was stunning. I mean,
beautiful. Stole the show, I think.
Kamala
personally.
Harris looked amazing.
I didn't see her.
Dua Lipa was there.
Saw her.
It was
Kim Kardashian.
I didn't even recognize her.
I thought she was great.
Well, she didn't take Marilyn
Monroe's
Monroe's dress this time.
No.
I didn't take, as I said, I didn't do a deep dive. From what I saw cursory, I thought this year the women looked very nice. The men were the surprising ones, that they had gotten much more elaborate in their dress. Usually it's the women go extremely elaborate and the guys are a little more
Well, the theme was black
wow.
dandies. That was the theme. And, it was really, I read an article in the New York Times, because it's really interesting that this was all decided in October to really celebrate black heritage and black dressing and then, of course, the election happened and all this anti-diversity and Anna Wintour is like, look, this is not supposed to be a political point. That we're just celebrating people's history. And
it matches an exhibit that's going on, too.
And that's the exhibit. And I think, honestly, I think that's what it was. Nobody tried to say anything political. Right. It was just a really wonderful display.
But did you think the men kicked it up this
The
time?
men came
Absolutely.
up. Do you see Al Roker? He and Deborah Roberts were there.
Mm-hmm.
He looked terrific.
Yeah.
And then you said Jeff Goldblum. It was all the men really stepped up. Of course, I'm sure behind every great male costume, there's a woman there making sure it happens.
That's right.
Well, I'm just always happy when I see the guys get more experimental and exciting in fashion. For too long, we always thought just put on a black tux and you're done. No, let's live it up. If you guys have seen my jackets that I have,
I've seen them.
I
I've
believe in
competed with
living
them.
it up. Yeah.
The key here, really, for the Met this year, which I thought the theme took it up a notch, was the tailored.
Oh,
so
yeah.
everybody looked extremely sharp in the way they came. There was a lot less flowy and romantic, and it was very, I felt, strong and sophisticated, and it came through masculine almost.
The one that I thought let me down was Anna Wintour's outfit.
She was very plain.
Yeah, very. I would have seen
who
that
did
at
her?
the Oscars.
Louis Vuitton. It was Louis Vuitton who designed her outfit.
Traditional in a sense.
Do you see Demi Moore with sort of
that big
halo thing? I don't know.
I told you I got to go back and look more. Talking about going back a bit, we were talking about that boat brawl, the carnival, getting rid of the boat brawl 2025. We've got a call on that from Jeff. Jeff from Houston. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you got to let the cruise line ban them for life. You can't let people continue to do this. And I think the airlines need to do it more often and a lifetime ban, too. That will stop it.
Jeff, are you a cruiser? Do you go out on cruise ships?
I've only been on one, and it was very enjoyable. My son and daughter-in-law's wedding.
Nice.
So no brawl, thank goodness.
No, all the in-laws got along great.
Well, hopefully they still do.
Jeff, thanks for calling. Remember, we're always welcoming your calls and comments at 713-440-8870. I think when you talk about, like Jeff was just talking about, there's a harmonious feeling to being on a cruise, and I think that's when it works best, when people can build that sense of camaraderie. And you do feel friendly with the other folks on the cruise. To have something like that happen, even after the cruise, it ruins the romanticism of it, the fun of it. I've been using romanticizing a lot today. But anyway, and so I think, you got to be firm.
Well, then they were.
Yeah,
I mean, they didn't even put it up for a vote.
Right.
We
did.
We're the ones discussing it. They're like, there's no discussion here.
Okay, you need to know this. It's National Teacher Appreciation Day. So if you have a teacher in your life, appreciate them. Also, how about National Nurses Day? Appreciate the nurses, too. Our healthcare workers face a lot of challenges you can't even begin to think of, and they try and do it with dignity and respect for every patient. So show them some of that back. And while you do it, have something to drink, because it's also National Beverage Day.
There you go. Coming
There you
up on Hello Houston, we'll discuss the latest Houston hurricane projections with research scientist in the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State University, Dr. Phil Klotzbach. And we are also taking your calls on any of today's topics at 713-440-8870. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. Next time on The Middle, it's been 35 years since President George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act into law.
America welcomes into the mainstream of life all of our fellow citizens with disabilities.
That law prohibited discrimination and required reasonable accommodations in public buildings and transportation. But today, with over 70 million Americans living with a disability, what improvements still need to be made? That's next time on The Middle.
You can hear it Thursday night at 8 p.m.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Chariot Energy, focused on delivering tailored electricity plans by time of day usage, offering residential electricity plans through its online portal. Details at chariotenergy.com. Support comes from electricityplans.com, helping Houstonians find electricity plans based on home energy usage, with tools to compare rates. Enrollment details and more at electricityplans.com. Tonight on Houston Public Media TV8, join Patty Heenich on a journey inspired by the Pan-American Highway to celebrate the many cultures of the Americas. Watch Patty Heenich Explores Pan-Americana, tonight at 8 on TV8.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Houston Community College with AI and robotics training for a real-world education in technology. Sign-up information and more at hccs.edu.
Support comes from DePelchin Children's Center. May is National Foster Care Awareness Month, and DePelchin is celebrating the foster parents who ensure that Houston area children are part of safe and loving families. Learn more at depelchin.org. Support comes from GenPro, a Houston-based home generator service providing power to homes during unexpected outages, helping with connectivity and productivity. More information is available at genpro.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. Join the conversation. Call now, 713-440-8870, or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
We're back.
Welcome back.
We're back. We're brawling.
We're not brawling. We're behaving because we have civility.
We're against brawling. Do
You
not
will be
brawl on
banned
cruise
from
ships.
life if you brawl.
I agree. Okay. Speaking of being out on a boat on the water, hurricane season is upon us.
Good. And you're stealing my segue title. You're doing very good at
It's
these.
such a tough challenge there. Yeah, it actually begins the 15th of this month for the Pacific and June 1st for the Atlantic. And as we prepare for that, it's always helpful to have some idea of just how active the season is expected to be. So with us now to tell us more is hurricane forecaster Dr. Phil Klotzbach, who's also a senior research scientist for the Department of Atmospheric Science at the Walter Scott Jr. College of Engineering, where he's worked for the past 23 years. Which means he got the job when he was 6. Look at him. He's developed the 2-week forecast issued during the peak months of the hurricane season between August and October. His first forecast for the 2025 season came out in April and will be updated again in early June. Phil Klotzbach, welcome to Hello Houston. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate the time, taking the time to talk with me.
All right, let's get to it. So let's remind everyone, Phil, first of all, what's considered an average season?
Yeah, so an average Atlantic hurricane season has a total of 14 named storms. So those are systems named by the National Hurricane Center, so tropical storms and hurricanes. Of those 14, 7 becoming hurricanes, and of those 7, 3 becoming major Category 3, 4, 5 hurricanes. Those are hurricanes with winds of 111 miles per hour or greater. Right now, the average is based on data from 1991 to 2020. NOAA basically every 10 years will update that climatology. So starting in 2031, our average will be based on a 2001 to 2030 climatology.
Well, I like that you make the point. It's not a cumulative number. It's 14. Of those 14, 7 can become hurricanes on average, and of those 7, 3 become major. So I was around when Dr. Gray first, I started in 1982. I remember when Dr. Gray started in 1984 making these forecasts, and we were all like, really? Somebody's going to try to forecast how many hurricanes we're going to have? That is absolutely crazy. But he did a pretty good job of getting it right. And I always kind of went, if Dr. Gray says it's going to be busy, it's going to be busy. And if he says it's not going to be busy, then it probably isn't. So that has been fine-tuned now that you guys have a pretty good track record. What is your accuracy rate now?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Dr. Gray, actually, my mentor at Colorado State, started these forecasts all the way back in 1984. And so we've obviously tuned the methodology over the years, taking into account just better data that we have now than he had in 1984. But overall, I would say for the April forecast, it's about plus or minus 3 hurricanes. When you get to June and to the updates in June and August, it's more like plus or minus 2. We have actually also shown improved skill in recent years. Just we have a lot better technology than we did, say, 40 years ago. So kind of like, your day-to-day weather models are a lot better than they were 20, 30 years ago. Our seasonal forecasts are also getting better, both due to better historical data, which was basically how we develop our models, as well as better forecasts of things like El Nino, Atlantic water temperatures, Atlantic shears, the critical factors that drive above or below normal hurricane seasons.
Yeah, we barely had models 40 years ago. I mean, it was hard to find much more than a weather balloon back then. So what do you look for? And keep it fairly simple in terms of water and temperature and pressure. But what parameters are most important for your forecast?
Yeah, so we look at a wide variety of factors, really, especially, the February, March, April timeframe that we're in, and now we're into May. We look at kind of conditions all around the globe. And then as we get more towards July and August, we really tend to focus a lot more just on the tropical Atlantic. And the reason why we go a little farther afield this time of year is just due to the fact that basically we have what we call teleconnection. So basically, when you warm temperatures one place or the temperatures drop one place, it can then change how the atmosphere responds. Two of the big factors that we look at are El Nino, La Nina. So basically, El Nino is warmer than normal waters in the central and eastern tropical Pacific. La Nina is colder than normal waters in the same region. And why that's important is because of what it does to levels of vertical wind shear, which is a change in wind speed and direction with height in the atmosphere. Too much shear tears apart hurricanes. When you get an El Nino, again, that warmer water in the eastern and central tropical Pacific, it tends to shift where the thunderstorms form in the Pacific Ocean in such a way that the winds high up in the atmosphere blow stronger out of the west into the Caribbean, into the tropical Atlantic. That tends to increase those shearing winds that tear apart hurricanes. They mix in dry air and really tends to squelch the storms. So in general, El Nino is good for us, bad for the hurricanes. La Nina is bad for us, good for the hurricanes. So that's one of the big factors that we look at. Another big factor that we look at every year is how are the Atlantic water temperatures? When they're warmer than normal, that provides more fuel for storms. It also tends to lower the pressure and also tends to relate to lower levels of vertical wind shear. And so, one of the important things with our seasonal forecast is we don't look at these predictors we look at them individually, but then it's also important to consider them in combination. And one of the big reasons why that really kind of came to the forefront was if you look back in 2023. So 2023, we had a strong El Nino, and the prevailing wisdom is a strong El Nino kind of dominates over everything else. However, in 2023, we had a strong El Nino, but also a record warm Atlantic. So the big question was, which would quote unquote win between these two kind of forces that normally pull hurricane season one way or the other. And actually the warm Atlantic won. We had a very busy season with a total of 20 storms. So it's important to kind of take these predictors. We look at them individually, but then also consider them in combination.
So, Dr. Klotzbach, even though June 1st officially kicks off the season, we've seen something develop in May almost every year in the past decade, it seems like. Why is that?
Yeah, so we have seen storms forming prior to the start of the hurricane season. Oddly enough, last year with the warmest Atlantic on record at the end of May, we actually didn't have any storms form until Alberto in about the middle of June, although we did have the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record last year with Hurricane Beryl. But yeah, we have had quite a few storms forming prior to the 1st of June or in 2022 and 2023. We had a storm form right after the 1st of June. And so some of that may be to the fact that basically the Western Atlantic is somewhat warmer than it was, say, 20, 30 years ago. So these storms can form just because overall the environment is a little more conducive. Now, it's important to realize, though, that while we have had some of these weak storms form prior to June 1st, we haven't actually had a full-blown hurricane prior to the first of, or during the month of May since 1970. So we have seen some storms prior to the 1st of June, but these tend to be fairly weak. However, just because they're weak doesn't mean they still can't cause problems. More obviously, given they're not super strong for winds, more of a rain issue than a wind issue.
You were talking about the range of years to help predict, and you talked about what we're looking at now goes up through, I think you said 2020, and then 10 years we'll look at the period of time here. What I'm interested in that, what we feel like we've seen, and you actually have the data that supports or doesn't what I'm about to say, in the last few years, the last 5 years or so, it seems like weather patterns have changed. The severity of what we're seeing has intensified. If that is true, then looking at what happened up through 2020, is that still reliable to help you predict what's happening in 26, 27, 28? Or is there a change happening out there right now?
Well, and so that 30-year climatology is basically just what they use for kind of a long-term averages. Obviously, we look at things up through obviously what happened in the past hurricane season. And obviously, we look at what we had last year in 2024 was a hyperactive season, but an extremely unusual season in that we had earliest category 5 on record with Beryl. Then we went to kind of when the season normally really ramps up in middle of August and had very little activity through the middle part of September, and then ended with one of the busiest seasons on record. So, it just kind of highlights that every individual year is different. And I think especially, with weather patterns changing, it is important to also, we also use a lot of forecast models. So not just looking at, we use the past, but we also look at forecast models, forecasting, say, the next 3 to 6 months for large scale weather patterns like shears and water temperatures to try to kind of get at, especially when we have these situations that we hadn't seen historically. For example, again, back to 2023, where you had a strong El Nino, record warm Atlantic. The question was kind of what would win. And we looked a lot at climate model forecasts, and they forecast record warm Atlantic, strong El Nino, and lower than normal shear. And we said, okay, they should kind of be able to figure out where air is going up and air is going down and how the shear pattern is going to respond. And by doing that, we ended up with a pretty successful forecast in 2023. I think had 2023 occurred, say, 20 years earlier, I think it would have probably been significantly under forecast, just given, again, the prevailing wisdom up to that point was that a strong El Nino would dominate. However, we just hadn't seen a strong El Nino with just as warm an Atlantic as we saw that year.
So staying with that question just for a second more, is this current period we're in, this what we feel is more erratic and unexpected and intense, is that something unique and different happening right now, or cyclically and statistically something that does happen and that this is not out of the ordinary?
Yeah, so I mean that gets to be kind of a hard question. It probably depends on who you ask. You probably, if you put on 10 of my colleagues, you probably get 10 different answers. We have been in a string of generally busy hurricane seasons. So since 2015, which was below normal, 2016 to 2024, 8 of those 9 years met NOAA's definition of either an above normal season or a hyperactive season. The only one that wasn't hyper or above normal was 2022, which still produced obviously Hurricane Ian, so obviously still an extremely damaging season. Some of this is due to the fact just that the Atlantic is warmer. That provides more fuel for the storms. But we've also been looking at a longer term trend towards La Nina. So not to say we haven't had El Ninos, we had a strong El Nino back in 2023, but overall, the tropical environment is trending more towards La Nina, and La Nina tends to favor Atlantic hurricanes, but also at the same time disfavor Pacific hurricanes and typhoons. So if we look, say, globally, and we look at the number of, say, hurricane events globally, that number has actually trended significantly downward over the last 35 years. The Atlantic tends to go somewhat opposite of the rest of the globe.
All right, we're talking to Dr. Phil Klotzbach of Colorado State University about his hurricane forecast, which we are now going to get to. So Phil, we talked about the average season being 14, 7, and 3. Last year, it was 18, 11, and 5. 18 storms turned into 11 hurricanes, 5 became major. So where is your forecast this year, and what are you basing it on?
Yeah, so we put out our first forecast on April 3rd. At that point, we did call for an above normal hurricane season. Not as much activity as what we saw last year. We're calling for a total of 17 named storms. Of those 17, 9 becoming hurricanes. And of those 9, 4 becoming major hurricanes. 2 primary factors. One, we do not anticipate El Nino this summer and fall. We did have a weak La Nina this past winter into this early spring. A few weeks ago, NOAA declared that La Nina was over. We're currently in what we call neutral conditions, which means neither El Nino nor La Nina. But we do think that the odds of El Nino are relatively low, especially given the forecast winds coming up across the central tropical Pacific look to be fairly strong. When those winds are strong, that promotes evaporation off of the ocean surface, and kind of like if you get out of a swimming pool on a windy day, you get cold in a hurry because you get a lot of evaporational cooling. The same works, off of the ocean surface. So we do think that the odds of El Nino are fairly low. In the Atlantic, thankfully, the Atlantic is quite a bit cooler than it was last year at this time. Obviously, that's good news, but we still have broadly a little bit warmer than normal, especially in the Caribbean and also in the subtropical Eastern Atlantic. And that actually matters this time of year because it then tends to force a weaker, basically lower pressures in the subtropics, which weakens kind of effectively the winds blowing across the tropical Atlantic. And if you have weaker winds blowing across the ocean, that tends to lead to the Atlantic to warm up relatively quickly. So we've actually seen those winds fairly weak the last 10 days to about 2 weeks, and we've seen the Atlantic go from actually a little bit below normal if you average across the main development region or the main region where hurricanes develop to a little bit above normal. So we're going to obviously be watching all this very closely as we get ready for our next update, which will come out on the 11th of June.
We will look forward to that. So let me ask you about Saharan dust. We get a lot of that here at Houston, and a lot of it obviously across the Atlantic. It's important for a lot of ecosystems. It helps suppress hurricanes just because it's hard to get a lot of thunderstorms when you have a lot of dust out there. And it obviously cools the Atlantic a little bit also. So given that, it seems to be a player in tropical development, especially June and July. But it's very hard to predict, and in fact, I don't think we really can predict it.
Yeah, so Saharan dust is kind of a tricky, it's a tricky one to handle, and I think last year's a really good example of kind of where, so normally in June and July, as you mentioned, you get a lot of dust that comes off the Sahara and off of what we call the Sahel, which is basically the region between kind of the equatorial region, which is very moist, and there's kind of this sub-arid region, and during the summer, what you end up with is you get basically these easterly waves or strong thunderstorm complexes that come off the coast of Africa. Those can also bring dust off with them, and often the strongest waves will bring off a lot of dust. So it can be a little bit tricky to kind of suss out, when you have dust, yes, that will suppress storm activity, but you can get really robust dust outbreaks after strong easterly waves or thunderstorm complexes. And obviously, if you're looking for a lot of hurricanes, you want those complexes being strong. So it is a little bit tricky. So normally what we found is that in general, you tend to, the dust in the Eastern Atlantic doesn't necessarily correlate super well with overall hurricane activity in a particular year. But if the dust goes farther to the west, more towards the Caribbean, that's where the area that tends to have higher correlations. And that likely means if you have a lot of dust making it that far west, you tend to have fairly strong winds blowing out of the east at lower levels, which means you have more shear. As you mentioned, also, obviously, dust, you just suppresses strong thunderstorms. Now, last year was kind of an interesting example. So last year, June and July, we had the earliest Category 5 on record. The shears were low. The waters were really warm. So we thought everything was pretty much a go for, a slam dunk, really, really busy hurricane season. Yeah, but we also had a lot of dust, which kind of went opposite of the normal relationships. Normally when you have a low shear and warm waters, you have less of that dust. And we do think that dust may have played a bit of a role in why during the middle to later part of August, the systems coming off Africa came off very far to the north. So normally they come off maybe 15, 16 degrees north. They came off more like 20 degrees north. And that matters because if systems come off that far north, they come off over cooler water and a more stable atmosphere, and they just basically didn't have much of a chance of forming. If, for example, you look late August of last year, the shears were extremely low, the waters were really warm, and the National Hurricane Center, their tropical analysis and forecast branch, is only tracking one very kind of weak, anemic system across the entire Atlantic. Normally you'd be tracking 3, 4, maybe even 5. So just there were really no candidates for a formation. So the dust tropical cyclone relationship is messy. And I think that's something we're going to be diving into and looking into a lot more detail. We did actually just also submit a research paper on the big lull that we had during the kind of normal peak of the hurricane season last year.
Quick question here, and if you addressed it, I apologize. You're good at predicting if we're going to have these storms. How good are you at predicting the path of them? We see when we're even watching forecasting leading right up to it, there's still a million lines on this page. How early on can you be confident in the path they're taking?
Yeah, so really the answer is not much. We can't say a lot with where the storms are going to track. And that's because, so with seasonal hurricane prediction, one of the reasons Dr. Gray got into this business is because the tropics have a lot of persistence. So basically in the tropics, if the pressures are low today, they're likely to be low tomorrow. Like there just is a lot of basically, persistence from day to day. Whereas in the middle latitudes, me being in Colorado, I can tell you right now it's 42 degrees in my house and pouring rain. 48 hours ago, it was 83. There's a lot of changes day to day. And so that mid-latitude weather is critical for exactly where these storms are going to track. I think really when it comes to seasonal forecasting and, seasonal forecasting and landfalls and impacts, more we can maybe do is get at maybe where storms are more likely to form. So for example, if a storm forms right off the coast of Africa, the odds of that hitting the US are actually fairly low. Not that they can't, but in general, they're going to track a little bit north of due west and are a little bit more likely to recurve. Whereas if something, say, forms near the Lesser Antilles or in the Caribbean, it's likely to cause significant impacts for somebody just because, it's in a region where kind of no matter which vector it takes, it's going to end up hitting somebody. So I think really trying to get more at maybe where storms are more likely to form is probably what we're going to be able to do better than forecasting where storms are going to track. That's governed a lot more by these day-to-day weather patterns that don't have a lot of predictability more than, a couple of weeks out. I would say with our seasonal forecast, there's not a lot we can say. We also do 2-week forecasts during the peak months of the season from August through October. With those forecasts, I think then we can start to kind of highlight, we can get more confidence as to potentially where storms may form, and then potentially also look a little more at how they may track. Also, I do want to point out the NOAA's Climate Prediction Center does forecast globally for week 2 and week 3 where storms may form as well.
And as we know, Phil, it only takes one.
That's right.
That will ruin your day. Thanks so much for joining us.
Dr. Phil Klotzbach is a hurricane forecaster and a senior research scientist for the Department of Atmospheric Science. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, we'll talk with the Texas Tribune's Berenice Garcia about how a city officially becomes a city right here in Texas. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
Your right to know what's really going on in our world depends on more than just great journalism. It depends on your participation.
Houston Public Media is funded by Houstonians for Houstonians. 80% of our budget comes directly from you, our community.
That's how trusted information stays free and accessible. No ads, no shareholders, just clear and careful reporting.
Protect your right to stay informed by visiting houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
The desire to have kids can be overwhelming for some parents, but maybe more people are on the fence than we realize.
Maternal ambivalence is the norm, and yet we're told that people that are hell yes are the norm.
Writer Ruthie Ackerman explains the less talked about paths to parenthood and her new book on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
It's coming up this afternoon at 3 o'clock.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from IL Texas, helping to prepare students for leadership roles in the international community by emphasizing servant leadership, language immersion, and character building. More at iltexas.org. Support comes from the Houston Symphony, performing Ravel's Bolero. Plus, Venezuelan trumpet virtuoso Paco Flores performs 2 concertos written especially for him, May 9th through 11th at Jones Hall. Tickets at houstonsymphony.org.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from the Near Northwest Management District, with a developer-friendly environment and Houston's 6th largest business center. More information at nnmd.org, at the intersection of innovation.
Join us for Hello Houston, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., taking a deep dive into the stories that matter to Houstonians, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained, with a generous support from our founding sponsor, John Bradshaw.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Okay, map makers, take heed. On Saturday, voters living around the area where Elon Musk's SpaceX operates in South Texas approved a measure to incorporate the area as an official new Texas city, and it will be called Starbase. The measure passed with broad support from residents living near the area, with unofficial results showing the election was a landslide. The new city will be official as soon as the county certifies the results. To tell us more about this and how a city officially becomes a city in Texas is Berenice Garcia, the regional reporter covering the Rio Grande Valley for the Texas Tribune. Berenice, hello there.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, are you living in Space City? Starbase, I should say. Let's get the correct name of it. You don't live there?
Yes, no, not quite. Just a few miles west. No, I live in the city of McAllen, which is actually in a different county. It's in Hidalgo County, which is to the west of Cameron, which is where Starbase is. But it is in the Rio Grande Valley, and so I do cover that area as well. And I've been out there a few times. I was probably there at least 3 times over the last week, just for the election coverage. And it's quite the drive. You kind of keep driving until you feel like you're going to hit the beach, and you nearly do when you go out there to Starbase. It's like just a few miles inland from the coast.
Well, Berenice, I grew up in Cameron County in Brownsville, Texas. My parents live in McAllen. They actually own a house on South Padre Island. I want to ask you a question because we opened this with where it says, the measure passed with broad support from residents living near the area, with unofficial results showing the election was a landslide. It was a small amount of people that voted. What can you tell us about the people that actually voted for this?
Yeah, I mean, there aren't that many people there who are eligible to vote. In fact, there are only 283 people who were registered and eligible to vote there. And of those, 218 voted. Only 6 voted against it. The rest, 212, voted for it. So yeah, I mean, what we know about those people that live there, most of them are employees of SpaceX or they're relatives of the people who work there. There are very few lots that the company doesn't own. And I think if we were to count all the residents there, it would be like about 500, maybe a little bit more or less. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the city of it's SpaceX city, you know. It's all employees there. Again, for the most part, with very few exceptions.
So Bernice, who's in control of the city?
So they did. Let me back up a little bit. On Saturday, when they had the election to incorporate, they also had an election to vote for the mayor and 2 city commissioners. And so they all 3 ran unopposed. So we have a new mayor. His name is Bobby Peaton.
Does he work for Space City? Does he work for Starlink?
Yeah, they all 3. All 3 have worked for SpaceX or currently work for SpaceX.
Bobby Peaton. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he is a current employee there, and as well as one of the commissioners named Jordan Buss. I hope I'm not mispronouncing his last name. The other commissioner, Jenna Petrozelka, she, as far as we know, she doesn't currently work there, but her husband is a vice president of the company.
Well, let me just take a guess here and just put some sand on the carpet, because it seems to me that Elon Musk has faced such pushback in his Austin neighborhoods with traffic that has been caused and all these neighborhood ordinances. It's like he can't fight the neighborhood. He can control the federal government, but he can't fight the HOA, especially in Texas. So in order to have his Starlink base down in South Texas, he didn't want to have to fight any HOAs or any neighborhoods, so he just made his own city. Isn't that what happened?
I mean, it's possible that's the motivation. I know that the company went to the county to try to build more residences on the lots that they have currently. The county turned them down. And just a few months later, I don't even know what was a month after that, that they filed this petition to incorporate. So I think that was part of the motivation, that they wanted to have laxer ordinances so that they could build more and attract more employees to the area. So I assume that they're going to try to do that. I can only imagine that they want to, as I said, make it a place where people actually want to live.
So what is the concern for locals, though? It's because the county will now no longer have any control over how they manage, how Starbase and SpaceX will manage how they set launches off. So the county no longer will be able to have any kind of jurisdiction over that. Are the locals concerned, or do they feel like this is a good move in the right direction?
Well, to be clear, the county still retains authority. As of now, they still have the authority to decide when the beach is closed off when it comes to launches. There is a bill currently in the state legislature to change that, at least for weekdays. So if the bill passes, which we expect it will, then the city of Starbase, the mayor and the commissioners, they will have the authority to decide when the beach can be closed down for those launches. But even if it passes, the county will still have the authority for weekends.
Okay, and the area we're discussing is less than 2 square miles of territory. It's 1.6 square miles of area. What can you tell us about the environment? That it's mainly beach, or have they already started developing any type of development?
Yeah, I mean, it is mainly beach. It really is still just this very public beach. It's very different from when you consider the beaches at South Padre Island, where they're very touristy, very well developed areas commercially. But when it comes to Boca Chica Beach, it's the people's beach. If people go out there and there's nothing there, but just this open area. But when you go further inland towards SpaceX and their facilities, there are a few residences. You see the big SpaceX facilities, but it's still very much open. But they are currently working on a commercial development. They want to build stores, shopping areas, restaurants. So that is something that they're working on. And I can imagine that we can expect more of that in the future.
You talk about, or we even said in the introduction, how overwhelmingly supported by the folks voting to make it a city. I'm curious, in the surrounding communities, what's the support for this?
I think it's very split. On the day of the election, we had environmental groups out there, indigenous groups, really against the incorporation because they do think that ultimately it will lead to more and more closures of the beach and the public losing access to, again, what was considered the people's beach. And yeah, I mean, they're very much concerned about the environment and what this is going to do to the local wildlife there. But then at the same time, you have people who really view SpaceX as really investing into the community, creating jobs, creating businesses, and just bringing more people to the area. And they see that as just a very positive thing and really transforming and opening the door to new industry in the region.
It just seems a bit of a throwback to the times when you had company towns back in the 1900s and stuff. And we moved away from that. And so it's interesting now, does every industry that builds a big plant or something somewhere that make their own cities? Or we,
like Berenice said, I think it is split. A lot of people think that this is really good for the economy down in the Rio Grande Valley.
Oh, it probably is great for the economy, but it also is, if you don't want any pushback on what you're doing, then you make your own town. It's like you build your own house. This is my house. I'll paint it whatever color I want.
What happens if you move your base of operations somewhere else? Then what, do you just neglect or ignore the town? I don't know.
It becomes a ghost town.
Berenice, so what is next? Now it is officially the Starbase has a mayor and its officials. What will happen next?
Well, first, we have to wait on the Cameron County commissioners to call. I'm assuming they'll call a special meeting sometime this week or next week to certify the election, and then the judge will enter an order, essentially proclaiming that it's been incorporated. And after that, it's really up to the city and what they want to do. There really isn't much that the state requires cities to do. It kind of all depends on what services the city wants to provide. If they want to provide police, they want to provide fire, then they have to find ways to pay for that. And then that can be done by raising money through property taxes, sales taxes. It really just comes down to what it is that the city wants to do, what the citizens want from their government. The other interesting thing that many people have been sort of in anticipation of now that they're a city is that they can be subject to open records requests. It's unclear how the city will handle that, whether we're anticipating that, but I think a lot of people are very curious as to what can be found out about the residents and SpaceX through public information requests and public meetings and things like that they'll be required to hold.
Excellent. Berenice Garcia is a regional reporter covering the Rio Grande Valley for the Texas Tribune. Berenice, thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
No, thank you for having me.
And that brings us to the end of our show. We want to thank you for listening, watching, commenting today on Hello Houston. We'll be back tomorrow with more conversations. This is News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altai, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from DePelchin Children's Center. May is National Foster Care Awareness Month, and DePelchin is celebrating the foster parents who ensure that Houston area children